Welcome back to another 4Community Inductive Bible study. Man, this is one of my favorite parts of the whole week when I get a chance to do one of these things so I can serve you. I hope I am serving you. If I'm not, feel free to leave a comment and let me know how I could serve you better so you can get more out of these videos. So as you can see, on one side of the screen, I've got the Olive Tree app open, which is where I get my Bible material from. New Living Translation is open. On the other side of the screen, you see that I've got Evernote opened up because it's my digital brain, so to speak. It's where I keep all my notes. And so I've got the three questions. What did I hear? What does it mean? What do I need to do? Observation, interpretation, application, which is the basic inductive study method. So we're starting at Mark chapter 1, verse 40. I'm not sure what's coming at me. I mean, I've studied through Mark, but I don't plan ahead with this. I just let the text speak to me, and hopefully you're going to let this text speak to you as well. So starting at verse 40, but it looks like we're running out of chapter here. We're almost done the first chapter of Mark. That's awesome. So we're probably going to stop at verse 45. Let's see how we do. Beginning at verse 40. A man with leprosy came and knelt in front of Jesus, begging to be healed. "If you are willing, you can heal me and make me clean," he said. Moved with compassion, love that word, Jesus reached out and touched him. "I am willing," he said, "be healed." Oh, I love the motivation, the driver of compassion for Jesus' activity. I love it. Verse 42. Instantly, the leprosy disappeared, and the man was healed. Then Jesus sent him on his way with a stern warning. Don't tell anyone about this. Instead, go to the priest, let him examine you, take along the offering required in the law of Moses for those who have been healed of leprosy. This will be a public testimony that you have been cleansed. But the man went and spread the word, proclaiming to everyone what had happened. As a result, large crowds soon surrounded Jesus, and he couldn't publicly enter a town anywhere. Okay, this is the point right here of this passage. He had to stay out in the secluded places, but people from everywhere kept on coming to him. Okay, so my initial observation, I think, before I go verse by verse and break it down a little bit, is I think we actually find the meaning of this passage in verse 45 right there, and the result in sort of the answer to the question why in 45. It looks to me not like Jesus didn't necessarily want people to know about him, but it looks like the more people knew something about him, something specific about him that maybe he didn't want them to know, then his life basically became harder. Okay, so I'm going to go through the inductive method, and I'm going to apply these three questions to text, and I'll come back with my answers, and hopefully your answers and my answers will be different, so it'll give us something to chat about. See you after the break. So I've put the observation, interpretation, application questions to the text. And I came up with something I think is kind of interesting, all about the crowd this time. We've been on agency for a while, but I think this text is really helping us to understand what and who the crowd is. So what did I hear? Here's the things that jumped out to me in the text. A man with leprosy asked Jesus to heal him. Yeah, you might think that's the whole point of this story. I don't think it is. He asked if Jesus was willing. That kind of jumped out to me. Jesus was willing. Thankfully, Jesus did heal him. Jesus told him not to tell anyone, yet be a testimony via the offering. So he's kind of instead of standing out in the public crowd, he's trying to get this guy to be a crowd member and sort of stay on the DL, stay below the radar, and do what you're supposed to do rather than bring attention back to me. The man told everybody he didn't do what Jesus asked him, so he spread to the large crowds, and then large crowds started surrounding Jesus so that he couldn't go into towns anymore. And for me, that's really what jumps out in the text huge to me. Jesus had to stay in secluded places. People from everywhere kept coming to him. So basically, those are the things that jumped out in the text for me. And so we're going to figure out, I'm going to figure out, what does that mean to me? How do I interpret that? Okay, so this is what I wrote down. This seems to be a side story, revealing a miracle and revealing a change to Jesus' public ministry. It seems to be a side story. The nature of the crowd has changed. So it's not a side story. It's a very important story. It's very important for us, I think, for me, to get this. The nature of the crowd has changed, making things harder for Jesus. So it's not really a side story. It's actually helping us to understand who the target audience is for gospel communication, who it is we're serving. You and I who are gospel communicators, you and I who are kingdom agents, who are we serving? It's helping us understand who the crowd is. So I'm not sure why the reference to Jesus' willingness is included here. I don't know. Jesus may have told the guy not to tell anyone because he was not interested in a crowd that wanted to see miracles. That's sort of what I'm thinking. He's interested in gospel receptivity. A large crowd of miracle seekers would hinder gospel receptivity. And cycling back to gospel communication would be less fruitful when people were present who just wanted a show. So that's really what I'm thinking here. I mean, in one light, it's kind of really weird thinking that Jesus came to seek and save the lost, to go to the crowds, and he's intentionally going to crowds to share the gospel. Yet here he is telling somebody not to tell people about the miracle that he just did, which would generate a crowd. So it's kind of like, what's going on here? And I think it's because of it's the wrong story. I'm pretty sure it's the wrong story that Jesus doesn't want going to the crowd. So this guy, instead, he just opens his mouth and words jump out and he tells everybody, but he doesn't tell them about the gospel. He says, here's this miracle worker. And suddenly the culture of the crowd has changed. I think that the crowd has actually gotten less honest, I think. The willingness question may have been a sign of the guy's faith, may have been. He was supposed to stay away from the crowds because of leprosy. He made everyone and everything he touched religiously unclean for sure. And like the pandemic right now, I mean, the guy he couldn't have walked around wearing a mask to protect people. He really was. So back in the New Testament days, somebody, if you had leprosy, which was an incurable disease, and yet you still lived for long periods of time as your body was just eaten away, it was required of you to walk everywhere you went. If you're walking into particularly public spaces, you were supposed to say or if you saw somebody coming towards you, you're supposed to say the word unclean, unclean, which was to tell people that you were infected. These days, we look for signs of people coughing, wearing a mask, people coughing, and the government says, you got to self-isolate for 14 days, but not everybody has been doing that. So people still walk around with a cough, and that kind of signifies to us, okay, that person might have COVID, staying away. But people with leprosy walking from far away, like you don't want to get anywhere near that, just like COVID. And so these people with leprosy, they were required to, government orders, required to shout out this word, unclean, unclean, and that's how they kept the society as safe as they possibly could during their sort of minor pandemic kind of thing, because leprosy wasn't going away. So he's walking to a crowd, he's coming up to Jesus, said Jesus will, and even right up to Jesus, right? Like this guy is a COVID breather, okay? And he comes right up to Jesus, coughing all over him, so to speak. And Jesus just receiving it, and he says, yes, I'm willing. Come on up here. I know you're putting me at risk. Come on up here. I'm gonna heal you. So that kind of jumped out at me. That's how I'm interpreting it anyways. The nature of the crowds flipped after this, though. That's the point I think I'm really driving home here. They were no longer attracted to Jesus, at least the real Jesus, in part, because of the gospel communication. They didn't want the gospel communication there. They didn't want to know what Jesus knew. They didn't want to hear what Jesus wanted to say to them. Their ears were turned off. And the problem with that is Jesus came in a huge part. He came to communicate, not just to demonstrate, but also communicate. Christians these days, they put a lot of emphasis into living a good life. I just need to live a good life, and my good life is going to be my witness for me. Jesus shows us that's not the case. And here we have Jesus telling somebody, don't let the story get out, because then people will come just because of what I can do. And unfortunately, that happens, and Jesus can no longer say what he needed to say. So it's harder for him to work as a kingdom agent now, and we see that he's going off to secluded places. So being a kingdom agent is both a communicator and a demonstrator of a kingdom that's present right here and right now. So the nature of the crowd flips, and he's having a hard time to actually communicate now. So they're attracted now to Jesus because of the miracles. It's not about what he says anymore. It's about what he does. And that's the challenge with many people who would say to me, I witness to people by my lifestyle. I'm just a good person. And somebody will ask me questions about my goodness. Well, no, Jesus says no. Jesus says, stop it. He said, I don't want people to know about my good works. And we're told that the stuff that we do, if we're just doing stuff to get accolades, I'm a good person. Shout my accolades and come and talk to me about why I'm good, and I'll tell you it's all about Jesus. Jesus says, no, do that stuff in the dark, and God will reward you. So Jesus is like, he's not a fan of this way at all. Okay, so part of the problem with the miracle-based attraction is that there's a culture that exists for this sort of thing that existed at the time. People were following false prophets, people were following teachers, people were following the show, and now Jesus is part of the show that people are sort of expecting in that culture. False prophets did false miracles, gathering a crowd. Back in the day, magicians or whatever, it could be called false prophets, they're thinking, okay, Jesus, he's doing real magic. This guy's doing real magic. Now let's not go to the other guy who's doing fake magic. Let's go to the guy who's doing real magic. So it's no longer easy for him to communicate the gospel because people aren't coming to hear. People are coming expecting a magic show. People are coming expecting, it's America's Got Talent, and there's a magic guy on the stage, and he's going to make me smile. We're going to clap. We're going to laugh for him, and it's going to be fun. And also, this guy does real magic, and I'm probably going to get healed too. So that's harder. The crowd comes with baggage now. And it makes it harder for Jesus to communicate the gospel. That's actually probably the primary reason. Well, not the primary reason, but one of the big reasons why I chose to no longer be a pastor of a conventional church and be a planter because of the audience that comes with baggage. With conventional churches, people come to church expecting something. Actually, Christians go to church expecting something. And it's a challenge to meet those expectations and also be relevant to people who don't know Jesus and need to know Jesus. Being surrounded by a group of people with expectations of what church is and what a pastor is supposed to be doing, it actually hinders a pastor and also other church leaders in the church itself to reaching the lost. So I'm like, okay, well, I can't work with this baggage. I need to get out and need to do something new so I can work with crowds. I can work with people that aren't carrying that same kind of baggage and aren't coming for the show. Now, it's a little negative. I don't think everybody who goes to church is going for the show. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that just like Jesus here, the wrong message got out about what he was doing. Just like the wrong message about church gets out to Christians or whatever. And there's this expectation of what it's supposed to be. So Jesus is like, now I'm stepping out of what's conventional. And I don't want the baggage. I want people to come at me fresh, not expecting baggage, but I want people. So Jesus often said through the Gospels, if you got ears, use them, hear, right? So the crowd now has baggage. Jesus' first concern is gospel communication. This miracle, inspired by compassion, changes Jesus' public ministry. And Jesus, his driver was compassion. Like, why did he come to earth? Why did he die on the cross? Why did he rise again? It's because of compassion. It's because of love. He's driven with love for you. He's driven with love for all of us. It changes, though, his public ministry now. So the crowd is bigger, and bigger isn't always better. Sometimes bigger is better when there's not this fake news kind of thing driving the growth of the crowd. This alternative storyline, this unreal storyline. That big for big's sake is certainly not it. A big crowd off mission, that's not good for anybody. A big crowd on mission, that's a good thing. But now Jesus is trying to work with a crowd that's off mission. He's trying to work with a crowd that's derailing him and his attempts at using his voice, using his words to talk about the gospel. And so he left that crowd and he he kept on church planting, so to speak. The crowd is bigger, I wrote here. That's good and bad. It's good that more people can hear, but I think it's probably more bad than good because the people coming to Jesus don't have the ability to listen anymore. And why don't they have the ability to listen? Well, because they're listening to themselves now. Their expectations are feeding. Their expectations are a filter to what they hear and to what they see. Their expectations are a filter and informing them of all the communications coming at them. I mean, imagine yourself going to a magic show and then at that magic show expecting to be entertained and expecting to see kind of tricks and stuff. And some guy starts preaching. What do? You paid your ticket to go to a magic show and suddenly guy gets up and starts talking about the Bible. Even I might actually leave because it's like a trick, it's you baited me. It's clickbait that we would say now on Facebook. It's like clickbait. And you promised me one thing and totally not. And Jesus isn't into clickbait and he doesn't like it at all. And so he said, no, I don't want it. So let's look at application. What do I need to do? And, I'm really thinking where I'm at as a planter right now and what I'm trying to do with 4Community. I need to communicate the gospel to the crowd. And whatever that crowd looks like for you and for me, it's going to be very different. Like the people that we're called to, the people that we resonate with the best. You and I are going to attract different kind of people and be attracted to different kinds of people. So that's okay. That's very good that you and I would share kingdom leadership and work alongside each other rather than sort of competing each other is very good. So I need to communicate the gospel to the crowd. I need to go and find a crowd. I need to be okay with starting small, because smaller crowds are more receptive to gospel communication. And I'm noticing this actually, like 4Community is not growing in leaps and bounds. We're not growing very quickly. We're growing very slowly. And part of that is very good because it's giving us a chance to actually articulate the gospel and articulate the mission and the purpose of what 4Community is. So that if there is any baggage coming in, we can deal with that right away and sort of throw out those expectations and help people see what 4Community actually is. So starting really small, very, very healthy. I mean, I'm tempted as well by large crowds. And frankly, I miss the large crowd. I used to work at the church that was about 1,400 people. And I loved it because I'm an extrovert and I loved all those people and I miss all those people. And I miss the great singing and I miss the intercultural environment, the wide diversity. I miss all of that so much. But you know what? I need to not be tempted to grow this thing too quickly and to focus on what the mission is and focus on communicating the gospel. I need to be cautious of crowds that are tractional based because they're less likely to be able to hear the gospel through their expectation of a show. That's not always true, but generally I think it's true. Large crowds derail real missions, particularly in smaller churches. I find the smaller churches that want bigger crowds, people will come in because of attractional based ministry, and then they'll be attracted to some part of the show, and then they'll say, okay, let's do real church now, and people will just leave because it's not who they really are. So the size of the crowd is not good or bad. The nature of the crowd determines effectiveness. Jesus wanted to grow the crowd so that more people could hear the gospel and respond to it. However, he didn't want a crowd gathering for any other reason, like seeing a show similar to the show false prophets put on in his day. Crowds are okay, but the nature of the crowd matters. And that's really the point, I think, of this whole thing here. The nature of the crowd matters. You and I are going to attract different kinds of crowds. My crowds might be 2 or 3 people at a time, 1 person at a time. Your crowds might be 10 to 20 people at a time. We've got very different platforms, and we're trying to do very different things. But we just have to protect the culture of the crowd. Our crowd culture needs to continue to be receptive. Our crowd culture, whoever it is that we're going to, they need to be able to hear some kind of gospel communication. So treat your people well, be friendly and nice with your people, but also make sure your people know that at some point we're going to be talking about the Bible. We're going to be talking about Jesus. It's not just friends for friends' sake. It's not just, the show for the show's sake. It's we've got something to share. We've got something that we want to tell you. Here's a summary that I have for the text here. The primary concern for mission is gospel communication. Therefore, the nature of the crowd is important. A large crowd expecting gospel communication helps mission. A large crowd expecting something other than gospel communication hurts the mission. The focus of the gathering needs to be gospel communication. Every other focus will derail the mission. The nature of the crowd matters. Creativity to draw a crowd is okay. Jesus was a very creative teacher. However, the purpose of the gathering needs to remain gospel communication. The purpose of the gathering, the purpose of the crowd, the purpose of us going out and doing good works, however it is that we do what we do. The purpose needs to be gospel communication. Here's what I wrote down just as my prayer. I like writing my prayers when I'm doing the inductive study, and maybe you would pray something similar to this. Jesus, please help me to find a crowd by starting to share the gospel with people. Please help me to grow that crowd by gospel communication and not be tempted to grow the crowd by any other means. Please help me not to fall into the trap of false teachers like the people from this story's time who are only interested in the crowd. Okay, so you can see some of my hot buttons, right? You can see some of my temptations that I don't want to be tempted to go back to the way it used to be. Large crowds, which were awesome. Those churches that I worked in, awesome churches, but I want to be fresh and real and relevant, and I don't want to be tempted to grow this into just a Christian gathering. It's a gathering for everybody because we need to be communicating the gospel and helping people move closer to Jesus that are very far away from God. Jesus, please help me know how to draw a crowd and keep its nature healthy for the mission. I should have said culture. Please give me the wisdom to know how to do this. Jesus, please give me wisdom. Please give me the wisdom to know how to create a missional crowd. Please help me do this. Thank you. Right? Maybe you would have prayed something like that. I'm going to stop here for now. I've got a message in brewing here, a Bible talk about how crowd culture matters. 4Community, creating community spaces so that you can connect with others and also with God. This is the inductive portion of it. The Bible talk will be listed pretty soon. And listen, when we gather on Sundays, we could use this inductive study as a launching point for the discussion. We could use the Bible talk as a launching point for discussion. I got to be honest with you, though. What I've found that people really like is we like to watch these during the week, but when we gather, it's about gathering, and we tend to do a live kind of inductive study on the fly so that so that the people who are coming out, it's an open mic concept. Everybody gets a chance to share. Everybody's voice gets heard. And people can say what's most relevant in the text to them and keep it personal and keep it organic. Okay, that's it. So 4Community, creating community spaces so you can connect with others and with God. And if you don't have a community that you're already connecting with, please consider connecting with 4Community. I'll see you next time.